So good afternoon. Welcome to 2025 and the first city council meeting workshop of the year. I'd like to call that meeting to order at 4 o'clock to talk about city council priorities and turn it over to the city manager to facilitate the discussion.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
And we do have Counselor Stone on the Zoom, and the mayor did just walk in.
Hey Reagan. Hey Mayor.
So one of the items that I had talked about in May, when we were going through the initial budget last year for this year, is I wanted to make some changes with the budget process. So the first thing I wanted to bring to council's attention, of course, is your priorities. We originally had this discussion, of course, every year. We in 23 put together kind of a high, medium, and low priority and have been working through them ever since. We have accomplished several of them. The idea from today's meeting is to get your full understanding of priorities. And I know that it's really easy to say infrastructure, because it really is. We can say infrastructure all day, every day, but there are probably 100 infrastructure projects that are a priority. And the purpose of today is to kind of go through what would you like us as staff to focus on, so that we're not putting 5 or 10% of our time towards 100 projects. We're putting 100% of our time to maybe 2 or 3. So what I provided council prior to this meeting was a list of the priorities, kind of an update. These are my internal notes that were provided. They may not be clear to some people, but they are to me. So I have what we did in 23, 24, and then of course 24, 25. I've also already started working with the departments on what are their goals, their priorities. We've already started working on their CIPs, which were requested to be turned in yesterday. We're already working on their budget worksheets to get an understanding of what they're wanting for this upcoming fiscal year. I did mention to them that we've been very lucky that all of our councils have been pretty much in line with our departments. I threw out the example yesterday with the council wanted to plant purple sage on every corner of the city of Alpine Blocks. A little far out there. Is that really a priority that meets with our departments? So we've had that discussion. So today I'd like to go through council. And I know that in the past there's been different approaches to how to do the budget, but I would really like to get an idea of your priorities. And then we can break it down for something a little bit, more tangible or more measurable, as far as if we want to focus on infrastructure, and we're going to solely focus on gas, and we're going to solely focus on smart meters. Then when I go back to do budgeting and I go back to that department, and I can have that conversation with it, these are the high level priorities and these are specific things we want to see done. Now, gas currently does have phase 1 in their budget to look at Fort Davis. We're still working out the procurement process to move forward with that project. But the idea is to kind of get a more focused approach from council, so that I can go in, work with our departments, and then also work with the numbers for the budget. One of the things that when we look at, especially with the infrastructure, which are your high priorities, is understanding some of these will require outside funding. Otherwise, we're going to keep putting money aside and the project's not going to get completed, because we'll never meet that minimum or that limit we need to do the project. For example, the wastewater treatment plant. We've been very blessed with being able to do it in certain phases. We're on phase 2 currently. But if we're going to save for phase 3, we may save for 2 years based off an estimate. And when we go out for the bid for the project, well, now it's doubled. We've seen that, especially after the pandemic time period. So based on what the priorities were starting in 23, 24, and they continued over to 24, 25, the council's still looking at, of course, the wastewater treatment plant, the streets, the water, and then employees. We have completed the compensation study. The departments have been provided their job descriptions, and we're also working at restructuring HR. For this fiscal year, council did approve the transfer of a full-time employee out of finance into HR to assist with all of the additional requirements HR covers, which is a lot of our benefits. So we are steadily working to make those improvements. When we look at the medium one, you'll notice that you have some of the key things like our short-term rentals, grant priorities, budget. That one's every year. It really is a priority every year. Billing positions, city attorney list of accounts. We did complete the chapter 23. We are working on the upgrades to our utility software, which will have a presentation at the upcoming meeting. And then, of course, we talked about that sale and of city property. And then some of the low priority ones, which we have completed the city charter revisions. We did review and update the golf course resolution. And we do have an ordinance process in place. We did get the annexation map updated. We're working on the zoning map. We have an ongoing policy review for resolutions and policies that are annual. We did get the board map updated and the redistricting. Now, the redistricting one hasn't been addressed. If the city was to go in that direction, we would want to seek legal counsel for support on that. Of course, the boards and commissions priorities, zoning updates, those were the more low priority ones. I think overall, when you're looking at your priorities, ordinances are going to need to be moved to the top as far as your higher priorities. Take into consideration as we're reviewing ordinances, it does take time. We do have a process in place. We do ask for outside assistance from our planning and zoning commission, our animal services, our animal advisory board, get their input as well. But also it's city staff time, it's council member time, it's volunteers time, and then it's the expense to make sure we get everything codified correctly. So when we're looking at updating ordinances, I do think that council does need to start focusing on some of the ones you'd really like to see processed, completed. I know Councilor Nance has done a great job with working on the short-term rental. We're gonna move forward with getting that one presented to city council. We know that they're gonna have to change down the road because we're dealing with it now. But that's one of the priorities I'd like to see council consider. And from a budget perspective, that would affect the codification. There are expenses to ensure that we do get those codified correctly. We've run into that with some of our ordinances for zoning and one that wasn't codified. It's still an up-to-date, accurate ordinance. It just wasn't codified. When we look at our wastewater treatment plant, my suggestion is going to be the second, or actually would be the third phase of the wastewater treatment plant, which would be the second clarifier, to have that in the budget for next year if council's on board with it. We also have the Holiday Lift Station. So the Holiday Inn financially supported the city in putting in the lift station that's over there. We've been very blessed that the past 2 years we haven't had the issues with it, the pump going out. Current estimate to replace a pump is about $25,000. Typically, the pump goes out because it doesn't have the ability to grind the material that comes through. We see a lot of jeans. We had a pair of shoes. We've had towels. It's kind of a cluster of material that comes in. We have pinpointed most of it is coming from Sul-Ross State University. If there's a will, there's a way. Those college kids will learn to flush it. At one point, we had kind of tentatively reached out to Sul-Ross about them putting in a grinder pump on their side before it hit our side. We did have a feasibility study done, and one of the suggestions was to go with a gravity fed and actually remove the lift station. There used to be a gravity fed system in place there. When they upgraded and added the hotel, they thought that in the long term, the lift station would be a better process for it. Unfortunately, it has not always turned out that way. That is still on the items of projects to be completed. If council chooses to move forward with that, we do actually have money already put aside for that. So there has been money allocated to that. The other one is the streets department. You've heard the street department reach out and have the conversation about wanting more equipment. That is an expense that we would need to consider looking at if we wanted to borrow funding to be able to complete this, or if we want to go ahead and try to lease something so that there's some type of plan in place. So that's a conversation as well. The water plan, I do have an update for the council's meeting tonight. I'm going to go ahead and put this out there now so that you guys are can think of it when we go into further discussion. One of our Sunny Glen tanks is leaking.
No.
So
I'm sorry.
not
Not surprised.
not an easy fix. We do have these tanks inspected. So it's not that we hadn't done our due diligence and kept up with inspections. It had been inspected. They have been able to isolate it. We are currently working on trying to figure out how we can bring a vendor in to fix it without completely draining it. This means we have to have a diver who can weld underwater come in to help us with it.
Expensive.
Yes,
Rick,
There we go. All right.
Rick can dive
we're
in.
gonna do it internally. We're gonna figure it out.
Rick to do it. Rick can do it.
Supervise. But we
For the
are
lot.
monitoring, we are working on it. But these are things that are coming up that we need to consider. This is something we're not gonna be able to wait till next year. This will be a future conversation once we have more information to be able to present to council with, hey, this is what it ideally may cost us. We still have the considerations for what has been proposed by the engineers. They are scheduling time to come out here to work with our utility team to dig up that line to see if we can connect the booster pump, the one that is sitting there not being used, to tie the two sides. Still in the works. But the other one that we have kind of on the back burner, but it's still a top priority, is the feasibility study that was completed for the water pressure on the east side. Especially with the new housing that's going in. I don't believe they started construction because they're waiting to ensure that they have water pressure. So that is another project that if the pump station, if we can get that working, may solve, but that's something to take in consideration. Other than that, I know that those are the key things that we talk about all the time when we look at council priorities. I think the main point of today's workshop is to come back with some priorities that I can look at what the departments are putting together, what their focus are, and then I can start working back on the numbers. I know a lot of times we start off with, do you want to raise taxes? Do you want to have increased fees? I would like to, as I stated, change the budget process. I want to get your priorities. I want to get the understanding of the direction you're looking at. Compare it to the department's direction, put some numbers in place and bring you that budget that's unbalanced. Bring you that, if we leave the revenues as it is and we go with your priorities and the department's priorities, this is the huge difference. This is the 2 million difference between the revenue and the expense. And how do we justify? Do we cut back some of our expenses? Do we look at raising fees? Do we look at taxes? But also at the next city council meeting, we're gonna have a workshop on funding opportunities. And I brought in a third party to help kind of explain, what do we have available? Is it a lease program? Is it a certificate of obligation? Is it a actual refund bond? Is it, what are our options to borrow money to complete some of these priority projects? I've also had the conversation with all of our departments to be realistic. We have lots of wishes. We have lots of things that we want to accomplish, but I've asked them when they look at their priorities for this next fiscal year to be realistic that they can actually complete them. A lot of these big projects that are still pending, and I know some of our citizens, our invisible ones, they're like, well, you're not getting things done. I don't think people understand that our utility department, our water department, out of the 8 employees, 6 of them have been there less than 90 days. That is a huge setback when you're thinking about big projects, because you don't have the training, you don't have the skill in place for them to take on the additional work when they're looking at trying to, read meters, and they're trying to do water leaks, and they're trying to learn how to fix a sewer backup, and how do I, do a tap assessment, how do I install a new tap? So when I look at their priorities, and we had a discussion yesterday, I wanted them to understand, if we need to contract something out, we need to put that in there. We need to say, hey, I can't do this in-house. I need someone to come in, and we're gonna pay that little bit extra, but then the project's gonna get done. We can go in and say the staff is doing what they need to do to run the day-to-day operations, and we have a contractor coming in that's gonna replace 100 feet of whatever. So I've asked them all to be realistic with their projects, because I know a lot of them would like to replace all of the, I throw Eddie out there, and I told Eddie, I was like, I know you'd like to have all your roads paved this year. All of them completely redone. Not realistic. Not only from a financial standpoint, but from a time standpoint. he doesn't have the staff to seal coat or refurbish or repave or completely rebuild over 1,000 city blocks. So I'm gonna open it up to kind of get your insight, what you feel each of your high priorities are, so that I can start working back with the departments, and kind of narrow down what, council as a whole would really like to see this project completed or initiated, or how do we get phase one? And then go from there from the budget perspective. That way, when I do the summary for the budget, you've noticed over the past 3 years that every year it gets bigger. Every year it has a little bit more information. All of the departments are now gonna be separated out and have a summary of what are their goals for the year, what are their priorities, and how does that go back to council. The reason why I'm also making these changes is I know that every year we get through the year and something comes up and we want to do something different. We want to, but we really should focus on this project. You know what? The city inherited 4 acres and I want to turn it into an amusement park. This is where the council and I can have the conversation with, this is what your priorities are in the budget, and which priority do you want to change to have an amusement park? And that way we can have a clear discussion on, these were the council's priorities, these are the goals and the priorities of the departments, and this is what they're working towards. And then that way, if we do have something come up, we can adjust accordingly. Because sometimes we have that 23 item list or that 30 item list. And like I said, one person dividing 100% of their time between 23 items doesn't give a lot of percentage to each item. So we want to make sure for this year's budget, we put down some of those actual projects that we can see. I can go back with departments and say, okay, this is a priority. It's in line with what your priorities are. How do we get phase one? What's the first thing we need to do? Is there a procurement issue? Is this a multi-year project because we want to replace all of the infrastructure for Sunny Glen? Or is this a small project that we know we can get done in a couple months? With that, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I think you're right. We need the flexibility to be able to change things as some certain things come up throughout the year. So we want to keep that in there as we have in the past. Wastewater and water. And that's where I feel that we really need to focus. We need to get this plant taken care of. We've talked about it quite a bit. We've got it started. Let's get it finished. And then also make sure that our water is stable. The leak, the generators, the pumps, the wells. What are we going to do about additional water wells? Are we going to lease from somebody? Are we going to continue to explore the ones that we have that we've closed off? What are we going to do for that? And we have this housing development that is supposed to come. Skyway Gardens Part 2. And as we know, we need the housing. Okay. Wait a minute. We'll wait for her
Pause
to
for
come back.
station identification.
You want to do like a 5-minute?
Sure. Yeah, let's do a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Hi. How are you?
Welcome.
Gio, when you're ready.
Okay, right.
Okay, and so that's what I have to say. I'm glad that we're focusing on, I see on here, the hiring utility director, finance director still on board to come in sometime.
She started yesterday.
Yay!
And I sent a job offer letter to a utility director possibility today.
Okay, and they have, where are they
No
from?
response yet. They're from Horseshoe Bay area.
Okay, so you've mentioned this one to us. And then our, of course, the city of Alpine, the town of Alpine residents want us to focus on economic development. We still have that position, and how are we doing with hiring that?
So we've not received any applications. The initial person we thought was gonna be excellent for the position, is not moving down. So
Okay,
they turned it down.
okay,
Housing problem?
No,
okay.
her husband has a better job.
Okay. Yeah, so that should definitely be a priority. I've done a lot of traveling, with going back and forth to my hometown because of my parents. Been through a lot of little cities as I've gone towards Centerville, Texas, and I could tell you, we have great roads. We really do. I know people complain about them, but our roads, our streets are pretty good. There may be some that need work, like up in Country Club Estates or, various places throughout town, but overall, our roads are phenomenal compared to a lot of these places. All right, so I'm gonna pass it on, Rick.
Thank you, Mayor. Making a great list. And you always know I'm looking for the list. What are our, SMART goals and objectives? So let me kind of work my way through, and then Mayor, I'm going to rely on you to say, Rick, your time's up. Let's move on. Your priority list, I think the top four are the right ones. Under the wastewater treatment, clarify number one, drying beds. My presumption is those going to proceed. Drying bed or clarify number two will be great. I think the question about the lift station, because I get asked by that all the time by Paresh, what's the plan? If we can get rid of the lift station or put a different grinding pump in, my sense is you're probably talking about the same amount of cost. If you're talking $25,000 for a pump, it's going to cost you at least $25,000 to take it out.
So within 1 year, we spent 120 something thousand replacing.
Okay, so 25,000 to replace the pump is really low, so it sounds like gravity feed may be
So
better.
that is been the recommendation. We haven't had a utility director run with it. So,
Okay,
and but that's not unusual for Alpine because everyone who's been with the city, they don't stay.
okay.
So they say, yeah, let's do it. And then they resign, they retire, they move. And then we're kind of back to square one.
If you want, I'll talk with Ben Talaska, who now has facilities at Saul Ross. I'll have the discussion with Ben about whether they're willing to put a grinding station in up there. If that resolves the problem, it's on their nickel, saves us.
That is the direction I would like to go with
I'll
before
talk to
we
Ben.
pull up.
Okay, I'll talk to Ben. Ben and I meet weekly. Okay, so in fact, he and I just had a discussion yesterday in a walk around. I'll work that. Okay, number two on my list. We had a meeting amongst us on our strategy for streets. My expectation is we're going to continue down that strategy. As I recall, there was not a lot of equipment we needed to buy. We needed a hot box, a couple other things, so I'm not sure. I know Eddie has his list of stuff. But before I'm willing to go forward and says, let's buy a lot more equipment, I'd really like to understand, how does it fit with the strategy we adopted last year? Okay. Water plan, my view is I don't think you have any choice. Get the welders out, go get an estimate, figure out what it's gonna take to take care of that leak in Sunny Glen. I think once we have that understood, then the next is work the water pressure on the southeast side. Because that's, in my mind, the next important thing, particularly for development over there. And then however the rest of it gets out, so those are my thoughts. Okay. Your employee market pay, I'm waiting to see how that plays out. And the one thing I think will be important for us as council is to understand what is our pay and benefits having an impact on retention. If it is, great. If it's not, then we have some other issues to go work. But I think for me, that's the driver, because we allocated the dollars, that's the right thing to go do. So to me, those are the high priority. Medium priorities, it's hard to argue with anything on the list. In my opinion, it would be, hey, Megan, as a city manager, what are the things you think need to get worked in that, and come back with your priority recommendation 1 through 7 or whatever they are, and then allow us as council to give you feedback. On the low priorities, I would do one more workshop for all of us, because Gio put the list of all the ordinances. Let us ruminate over it for a couple of weeks and come back and say, hi. We'll kind of follow up the list. That may help. If we can coalesce around that, I think it'll help give you all some sense about which ones to go focus on. Okay. Zoning map, I thought we had a great discussion, last month on zoning, so I presume that will work its way through. That was all part of the word map as well. Economic development, the one thing I didn't see on here, which I thought I would have seen, is comprehensive plan. because I thought that was gonna be tied to overall economic development. So maybe I just didn't read it properly.
So I reached back out to AJ, no,
Yeah.
is it AJ? Kind of to get the understanding of the next step. So the
Okay.
next step is a procurement process.
Okay,
But I wanted to work back with her, and of course, the holidays, everything's gonna
Yeah.
come up, kind of understand, and I think we need to have another discussion item with what you want to see.
yes,
Because when she presented, you have a strategic and then you have the comprehensive, but the comprehensive doesn't have to include every item. I know we talked about like the
Yeah.
land use and stuff like that, so it's still on for this year.
I just didn't see it on the list.
No, it's on another list.
Oh, that's on this list.
Can we
See,
put,
so
can we put it on this
see,
list?
in my
Yeah,
view-
please.
this is
Yeah.
Megan drafted her performance appraisal for this next year.
Yes,
Okay, that's my simplistic view. I thought this is a great list. So does that comprehensive plan on?
continuation.
And we know how to have a dialogue with. it.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It is fair. I'll add the things that are missing because they're part of you.
We're gonna, but anyway,
Definitely
a
the
great list.
comprehensive plan.
I think the right discussion. I yield my time back.
Okay, good, okay, perfect. All right, so Lucy, so it looks like everybody's gonna have about 10 minutes, because I'm not sure if Reagan's there or not, but Lucy.
He's there.
I'm here.
Okay, good.
On I agree with what Megan said on a lot of things and Rick. Seeing this weekend, I could be wrong, no, it was this weekend where there were multiple leaks on Ward 4. And I thought if I turned another block and saw another one, I thought I'm just gonna just yell out loud, just get off my vehicle and just yell out loud because
Come with me and we can do it together.
it was unbelievable. It just kept going from one to the other. And there was another one. And I was just like, oh no. I mean, fast. And I thought, however, there was not enough. You couldn't put enough people there to help. It was just unreal. And that is a big priority. You know, and we see it everywhere. They just keep coming up and I'm just thinking, maybe somebody just threw water there, but it's not. You know, that to me is a big priority. It really is. And of course, taking care of the water well and that is also a big one. But the streets, you are right. A lot of them are better. I saw some streets, somebody would actually got their camera and was going through and I was just like, in another place. And I thought, oh my God,
We're great.
I don't know if you needed a horse to go through there or what, because not even a vehicle could go through that. But yeah, I mean, some of them just need to be kind of fixed a little bit here and there and taken care of, which we are really lucky.
Yes, we are.
You know, and I know there are certain potholes that are really huge and they can get taken care of too.
Right.
I don't care if you put, what is that? Galici,
All right.
it'll probably last. But I think you're right where you're going.
All right, I'm gonna have probably a bunch of questions, but they're real quick. Anything that is, out of all these projects here listed, which ones are we doing that are multi-year? So they're going right now and into next year.
So the ones that are gonna be multi-year is the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
So we started that one in 2021. So every year we try to phase another or cover the expense of the next phase. The other one that has been for 2 years is we are trying to figure out the water situation on the west side of Alpine.
So Jacob and Martin.
So Jacob and Martin, what we originally thought didn't pan out. So we actually do have a step list. I guess you could say like step one,
But
let's
we
try
have
this,
not
step
started
two, let's.
implementing.
No, we've done parts of it. So this is where we figured out that Pierce tank isn't leaking. We're doing the movement of the valves to see, okay, if we close this one, does it change any pressure here? If we open this one, we've done that as well. The next phase, of course, or the next step is to really see what happens with this pump station that's sitting there. Is it been pumped incorrectly, or I don't want to say wired, because it's not wired, but the lines going in, are they crossed? And that's why we had the issues. And I've spoken with Andy and asked him, what is our game plan? Like, what are the next steps? And so he's put together kind of a next steps, but 90% of what he needs is in the field work from our employees. And that's Johnny.
Quick So you kind of told me what I needed there. So anything else that's an actual implementable plan that we are doing this year, moving into next year? Because those are non-negotiable and they're going to continue.
The test well, we wanna figure out how we can, hopefully use it.
Mhm.
And if we can't use it, then do we wanna lease the Daughtery well? My focus is that the city needs to be sustainable on its own.
Uh-huh.
When we start relying on other wells, not that we don't want to, but at the same time, at any given point, a contract could be broken, or we become so dependent on it that when they say I want 2 million a year for the water, we're stuck. Because we don't have the ability to say no, because we're dependent on it. So the other one that is continuing year to year is to find that sustainability with the wells that we have available. One of the projects that has been kind of the CIP is to get Mooskie's well 8 and 9 back online. Currently, they've been dead for probably 15 years.
And the city owns those.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So we pay an annual fee to Jeff Davis County Water District. That is state regulated, so it's not like they can come back and say, oh, we want, no, it's a formulated through the state. It averages between 12 and 13,000 a year, and we use those wells for this site.
And I am in agreement that the highest priorities are going to be infrastructure. I think until we solve all those, then we just keep focusing on those. Every year, you're going to be trudging along and getting some stuff done on that. On each of those, we pretty much have plans. You have the KSA plan for traffic. You got Jacob and Martin plan for water. And then we've got the wastewater, you've got AMPS going on that. And so there's projects and plans on all three of those. I'd like to see some implementation of those plans so that we're not paying for plans and not getting some stuff, actionable items off of those. Comprehensive plan as well for zoning. I think that's needs to be added in here because I think that's a very important one. And then you can say the specific things on there, like you mentioned, Sunny Glen tank leaking, that's a must to get fixed. The wells, you know all this better than us, if that's a must to get fixed. Second clarifier, or the third phase, second clarifier, all those things you already know. So 100% on board with all that kind of stuff. Last question I had is debt. Would we be going out for debt? If so, on what projects? And so what projects would that be?
So this is where it's kind of a little bit tricky, and this is why I wanted to bring in a third party to have the conversation with you. Because our debt is very different depending on what the project is. So if we're going out for debt for the water department, that doesn't tie to our property tax. That ties to the fees with the water department, and you would have to raise fees to cover those payments. And so that debt is typically what is called a revenue bond. It's much different than if we went out for, you know, a general obligation bond with property tax, and that would affect our property maintenance and operating and interest and sinking. Sorry, it's because his screen's in the way, so I feel like I'm talking to a monitor. So if we were to go out for a project for the water department, the conversation would be is we want to go ahead and we want to Lewis test well. We want to go ahead and get it back online. We know it's going to cost us several $100,000. We don't have that sitting aside right now. You know, maybe we do. We're going to go out for a revenue bond, which means we're going to go and we're going to raise our fees, and we're going to raise it by X amount to be able to cover each year's payment.
Quick question then in that, so that I save time for others. In this, I saw we have a workshop coming for debt, so you're going to be presenting some options for us. You probably already in your mind have a couple priorities that are going to go outside the cost structure that we have in the piggy bank. Is that what's going to be at the next workshop?
Yes, so this is why I'm saying your projects are going to be water, wastewater. That's one set of funding. Your other set of projects is, and I know we need a better evaluation, but we know that the equipment for the street department is falling apart. We know that their maintainer is 20+ years old. We know that, you know, they wanted the hot box so that they could do and we purchased it so they could do the projects now. But I know ideally down the road, we're gonna have to replace it. Going out for a certificate of obligation specifically for heavy equipment, or, you know, maybe we wanna update City Hall, or maybe we wanna look at the other buildings we have and we wanna do some remodeling. That will go through that process. And that does tie back to our INS. And so when I talk about debt, the state is gonna come in at some point. They're already been trying. So we used to be able to raise our operating property tax rate by 8%. Now we can only raise it by 3.5%. So we went from having this capability to having this capability. So the city has done an awesome job. When I started here, I would have never said go for debt. I would have told you that is a laugh. Because our debt was about the same as our budget. It was so high. Well, now our debt for the general fund, which is our property tax, as a whole, is less than 600,000. That's everything that's left. Well, that means our M and O is here and we're doing great. We got more operating. So we're covering the cost of the employee salaries. We're covering some of the basic operating needs because we don't have a lot of debt. Well, what happens down the road is this is going to continue to shrink and now we're relying on this to do our day-to-day functions. Well, then we're gonna have a big project come up. Something's gonna happen. We're gonna have, your guys are gonna come back and say, we really want a new city hall. We need to go out for debt intent, which means we're gonna take what we've been operating off of and we're gonna shrink it so that we can go for debt.
So in,
And then the operating is gonna be the problem because we've set our salaries, we've increased our benefits, we've increased our operating, we have more resources. But we needed something new. And so ideally you wanna go to debt and you want them balanced.
so in that next workshop, I'm assuming you're gonna tell us the difference between a certificate of obligation and a revenue
Yes.
bond and everything else.
And
the
then I
projects and
have
stuff.
sent him an example of things that have been requested, like the equipment for the street department, some of our water projects. That way he can relate back to what we're currently working on. I didn't want to come in and have him utilize ideas from other cities. You know, so I've informed him that, hey, so these are some of the things that we may look at going out for debt. What are your thoughts? Can you do something to present? That way you kind of have a better visual with, okay, if we do get the heavy equipment that we need, this is what it's gonna cost and this is the end result.
I'll tell you, just to sum up everything that I think, we've got plans for streets, we've got plans for water, wastewater, and now we're working on a comprehensive plan. I think those are all our highest priorities, infrastructure and a comprehensive plan. And I'm not afraid to go out for debt if that's something you want to push towards. My final question is, and it's not even one you have to answer, but I want you to think about it is, how many projects can you manage or your department head manage? Like, I don't want to go out for debt and then you don't have the people or the purpose to kind of manage those projects.
And that's why I asked them to be realistic with their budgets. I asked them to put, you know, their top three that they can do, but to be very open and honest with it. This is a project that if we have to contract out, they need to say, this is a project we need to be completed, but we need to
Alright.
contract it to a third party. Because we do, and it's unfortunate, but we think we can do it all in-house. And we tell ourselves, oh, we can do it in-house. I've got the time. Eddie is a great employee because he will always say yes, but he can't say yes to everything anymore. He's got to kind of step back and say, okay, yes, I want to do this, but I need to, this needs to be contracted out because these are building maintenance too. And so if I want to remodel anything, it's his department.
Okay, Eva?
Everybody is doing great ideas and great opinions. I just wanted to add it to things that my people in my work have been asking related to water and the streets. I've been picking on you about the parks. You know, that water is a really big issue. But people has complaining that the parks in the west side, they're dying, like the Medina Park and the Valentine's Park. And but I know that water is very important, a big issue that we have right now. So I want just to pass on what my people and my work have been asking to this. The other one is the streets, is that the big traffic that we are having on Gallego Avenue, because the passing of the train, they get stuck so many times, so they detour through the Gallego. So I mean, a lot of people are like, when the city is going to fix that? Well, it's not the city issue, but I don't know. I don't know who we can contact or what we can do, not to fix it, but pay the attention so they can do something about that, the bridge that they get stuck and they detour all to the Gallego. And it's a heavy traffic on the Gallego. So those are the two things that my work have been talking about.
Unfortunately, you are right. When the bridge gets hit, it's not a city issue. Gallego is the detour route that is utilized. There's not another route to use because we have just, you know,
I know.
very limited access to the highway there. I know that everyone is working towards how do we get this fixed. UP has been contacted, TxDOT does get contacted. The delay usually is getting the debris removed. And so when the bridge gets hit, if it destroys the 18-wheeler in any way, it's waiting to get it removed, which usually means we have to wait for UP. So I know that we're working with it. There's not a solution this year.
I know.
So why don't I give the Tech Dot folks a call, because I was in the last meeting, the last two of them, we talked about the three-pronged step. One was to put warning signs in, starting all the way back over on Marfa's side, then on this side, then eventually, and so let me go work that one and find out what that is. That was supposed to be like quick. That's been about a year ago.
Yeah, so that was my understanding. They would put bigger flashing signs so that I
Yeah.
think they were supposed to start off of the shooting range. They were supposed to put starting signs there before.
Even closer to Martha,
It's supposed to be in Marfa,
yes.
right as you come through Pat into Marfa, get a first warning sign, then the shooting range, next warning sign, then a turnabout.
Yeah.
I'll give Anthony a call.
Thank you.
Okay, and Reagan.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy New Year, everybody. I'll see y'all in just a few minutes. I'm trying to finish up the workday as well, but I'm writing notes here and got a couple comments. Appreciate the list, first of all, and I won't go into infrastructure, but I'll just note that I think all of those that are on the red, or I'll note number one priorities, they're there. They need to remain there. A couple others that I might add to that, are communication. That could go under employees or something like that, but I think it might be its own. And I mean that by like internal and external. Everything that I've been, on the council for, I guess 6-7 months or so, is whether it's been like water billing or the airport, or even like which streets are getting repaved. We all, I'm sure, get asked questions at the grocery store or this or that. And I think just communication, whether that's a new position to have, someone that's helping Megan with that, or looking for new ways to reach the folks that we serve, just being able to communicate what is going on. Like a great example, to the best that we could do right now, is water billing, and getting those one pagers out and putting them in different places and fixing it, both internally as well as communicating that to our constituents. Number two, or also a number one, or a red priority, high priority. I think this also could be in employees, but hiring that grant position, that's and perhaps raising the salary on that to make it a little more attractive, that potentially they're going to be, managing millions of dollars of grants. We want that to be a well-qualified stand-up person. And I think that position could really, along with communication, really help your office, Megan. And I know, I'm guessing you would love to have that person hired tomorrow as well. But going down to medium priorities, some places I might move up and or add to those are economic development. We're talking about it everywhere. We're about to have a huge forum, which I'm looking forward to. Thanks to everybody that's been putting that together. And I think that it deserves the color yellow, as in we need to be looking at it and working on it. Another place that I might move to yellow as well, just because when I see green, I see it's kind of like a list that we're looking at, but we're waiting to move it up the scale. And that could just be my perception. But I think zoning, it's such a big enchilada. I don't know if we have all of the capability to do it, in the next year or so, but at the same time, I just think that it should constantly be on our head, because that would just help economic development. That would help, that commission, and us be able to do our job much more streamlined. Some others that I would add to the green, and like I said, this could be my perception, but the green or the lower priorities kind of are like placeholders, like we're waiting to add them up to medium or high. But I think budget should be in that area, because that's a thing we got to do every single year, and we just got to be good at it and know that there's time for it. I agree that it's a big priority, but at the same time, it's a normal duty. We got to do it. I think it takes up place in that medium area. And some others I might add to that, to the lower priorities would be beautification. I think we have great opportunities for low budget landscaping or other ways to be able to make our community more beautiful. I think also our recycling center is amazing, but I would love to see that expand into other plastics. Right now, we only accept 1s and 2s, and I know that that has a lot to do perhaps with our disposal company and other things like that. But I'd love to see be able to expand that, as well as, you know, potentially having more places around town to be able to do that, to be able to decrease the amount of trash that's going to our landfills. And then, you know, the last one that I would add is also energy. I'm a big proponent of, you know, more responsible energy. And so I think starting to look at having a city-owned solar farm or something like that would be really a great investment for not only our community, but something that we can sell out onto the grid as well. And the last thing I'd say is under low priorities, or rather it was under medium priorities, short-term rentals. We signed a contract. We're doing it. They're doing it. Maybe that can be either moved down a priority, or maybe we can take it off the list and put it on another list to you know, come back and check up on in 6 months or so. But that's just kind of my thoughts, and appreciate the time.
Thank you. All right, Megan, when is the next workshop?
For
Just the next workshop.
January 21st at 4 p.m. is the workshop for the funding opportunities. And that's to bring in a third party to discuss the different types of funding that's available. Debt.
All right, so we have about 10 more minutes. Watch out. 13 more minutes. If anybody has anything else.
I guess, Megan, I'd ask you just one quick question. Where do you see the city at the end of this year on some of these projects?
I think at the end of this year, we're gonna have a better game plan going into next year. I think the past year, we've kind of, I don't wanna say run around with chickens with our heads cut off, but we've had some changes, we've had some turnover. We've had a lot of issues come up, and so we've been able to strategize to start looking at, okay, how are we gonna resolve this? We also currently have a council who's on board with making some of these changes. You guys have been very open to the smart meters. You've been very open to, you know, looking at the employees. I think that's a huge impact, not only on our current staff, but our future staff. I do want to add that I'm trying to get our departments to take pride and accountability in their budgets. In the past, it's always been, well, these are the numbers, this is what you're gonna have, this is what you have to do. I asked each of them to do mission statements for the departments so that we know what are they trying to accomplish. I've asked them to look at their priorities and their goals. I've asked them to look at their staffing. What do you really need? I've also not given them an itemized list of their expenses and asked them, tell me what you want to see done for the year. Because it's easy to go through a budget and be like, okay, I had 5,000, I'm gonna ask for 6,000. I had 4,000, I'm gonna ask for 5,000. So I think because of the changes that have been slowly implemented and letting them take their budget and own it, we're gonna see that we've got a better strategy going into the next fiscal year. We'll see, okay, these were the projects, this is where we're at, this is where we're gonna be for the next year. And some of them unfortunately won't get accomplished. I do want council to understand when I bring more information to you guys, like I said, I'm changing the budget process and I've spoken to the departments as well. I'm not doing, here's your budget worksheet, fill in the numbers, here council, here's a balanced budget. I'm coming back with, this is what our priorities are. These are council priorities. Are we on the same page? These are funding options. This is the unbalanced reality. Expenses 2 million, revenue 1 million. Where do we come up with that difference? Where do we make our cuts? To have the full conversation, because it is hard. Because I go back to departments and I say, I have to compromise. We have to work together to work this out. But they're willing to do it. But I do want us to also not just focus on our infrastructure. I think when we're looking at the budget and we're looking at the departments as a whole, your law enforcement, your animal control, you have building services, you have administration, you have finance. There's a whole nother group outside of infrastructure that we also want to make sure that we address. Because when I do look at all of our citywide departments and I look at the city as a whole, you want safe streets, you want safe neighborhoods, you want quality of life.
Mhm.
So you mentioned parks and the dying trees. But when I come back before council and I say, okay, water's another piece, that's another budget. But look at the general fund, we want to make improvements with our parks. It's understanding this is their priorities and these are the projects they want to complete. How do we? So it's gonna be a little rough discussions. I know that nobody likes to raise fees, nobody likes to raise taxes. But I think the city's positioned themselves in a place right now that you have teams willing to move forward and get things accomplished if they have the resources.
Right. Okay, so your next step, are you gonna take what you've written down, email it to all the council? What's the next step? When will we hear more from this?
So the next step, and then part of the council meeting tonight actually has the budget calendar. So the next step is to have the conversation about the budget calendar so that you understand that this information will become the workshops. It's gathering, because I don't have everything from the department yet. They have a February 10th deadline so that I can start getting you guys draft information, let you see numbers, let you have that conversation. I know we can't set a tax rate. I know we're not gonna know what it's gonna look like for next year until after July 25th. But I'm gonna go off of what we have today so that you have that draft budget. So you're looking at March, April for budget workshops, which of course are open to the public. To be able to have that conversation with, okay, these are our priorities, these are our department priorities, this is where we need to look at. We are one of the very few cities who does not charge for a lot of the services we provide. And so those are hard conversations to have, and maybe we don't charge and we don't continue to charge. But at the same time, maybe we look at, okay, we're not gonna charge the Little League, but you know what, why don't we contract with them so that there's certain things that they have to help provide? Remember, they do help with certain things, but it's a service, they have access to all of our parks. Maybe we look at our pavilions, maybe we look at the pool in more depth and really have an understanding of this is what it costs to operate it, and we underfund the revenue side because we don't want to raise, we don't want people to pay $4 to use the pool for 8 hours a day. It's not that many hours, but these are the things we have to look at. I know that these little fees don't seem like a lot, but they do add up. And they do need to cover the expense of what it takes to operate.
I just have a question, what you just answered to Darren, that development, that teamwork that the city council we have in the meetings, if not affect, but it impact the employees. So they say, okay, they're working together, so they care about that. So that is that my understanding that you said that it will impact on them.
I believe that it does, because we've talked about how do we do better. The compensation study. Now, I know not everyone was happy with the end result, but the council took the effort to allocate the funding so we could bring in someone outside. If it wasn't Megan's opinion, it wasn't Eva's opinion or Gio's opinion, to evaluate the market in our area and what we're, competitive with, and come back with, hey, you do need to make some changes. I think that showed the employees that, hey, they really are trying to move us up. Now, are we gonna be able to provide them the border patrol starting salary with all the benefits? No, we're not. But we're going in the direction, and I've heard from employees that they do like the fact that they're tough. Now, I know every department would like to have at least 50 employees. So that they can get everything done.
Thank you for your work and your answer, Megan.
All right, great. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, with that, we're gonna conclude this workshop. Gio, can you move that clock forward about 3